Okay, so we are officially recording now. We're gonna go in 1, 2, 3. Dude, shut up! I don't care! You didn't need to tell me right then!
I was telling you count up. The other person doesn't inherently know where you're starting if you're counting to 3 or 5. That's why it's a countdown.
We've done it before. Once again, not the time to tell me that. In the middle of my damn recording. I'll make sure to give you notes in the middle of your recording.
I tried to catch you as soon as I heard it.
Shh. Stay back there. Look at your stuff. I know you are. Stay back there. Look at your stuff. Dumb thing is, that's not even like a brat thing. That's just our marriage.
It's great.
Okay, I will count down from 3 this time, and then we can get started. Does that sound good to you over there?
I was just the hopeful thing.
If I sued you, I'd be ended up hurting myself. We're married. It doesn't work.
No one wins.
No one wins here. All right. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Do you want to learn how to brat ethically? Maybe you're a part of the community, but have no idea what a brat is. Or you might be a newbie kinkster and need some 101 tips. Then register at Brat University, your prime podcast for brat and kink education. Hurry, classes start soon.
Break a heart like an eggshell, cardiac arrest or heart attack. Throw a tantrum, baby doll me up cause I'm a brat. I'm a handful, demi devil pyromaniac. Bitch I am one, throw a tantrum.
Welcome to Brat University. I am Brat-tastic, the brat coach.
And I'm Tatiana, the chaos brat.
And our topic for today is consensual bratting.
Ooh.
So at this point, I feel like we're all pretty sure what consent is, right? If you're in kink, I should hope so. I
would say if you have gotten to this podcast, you must know what consent is.
Okay, just a quick definition. Consenting is when all parties agree to participate in something. They're agreeing to do, to say, they're all in agreement on something. Everyone has consented. Yep. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is that bratting is a kink as much as it is a personality.
Yeah, for sure. My dom has a brat kink. He's had other subs before, and none of them were as bratty as I am, and he loves it. When I'm not being as bratty, he misses it, So it's definitely a kink for him.
Right. Whereas in my relationship, I am a sassy kind of bratty personality, and in my relationship with my partner, he doesn't mind that brattiness just between me and him as people, but when when it comes to our dynamic, that's not something that he particularly likes. So there's a difference between just having a sassy personality and actually bratting as a kink.
Yeah.
And so
for sure.
With all kinks, it needs to be consented by, in this case, I will say both. Obviously, it can't include more than 2 people, but for this episode of the podcast, we are going to just say, needs to be agreed on by both parties. And then bratting also needs to be negotiated, because sometimes bratting has limits and you need to make sure you are staying within those limits.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of baby brats really struggle with realizing that, you actually do have to have conversations about bratting, which seems kind of that would take the fun out of it. But it really doesn't at all, because the point of bratting is not to actually piss someone off. Once you're pissing someone off, that's when it's not fun, and that's when it's no longer part of a kink, really.
No, you get into non-consensual behavior because that person didn't ask to be pissed off. You're just pissing them off. And so I feel like there could be an entire episode dedicated just to bratting limits and ways that can be violated. But
absolutely.
A few, for instances, you know, there are certain statements that, you know, some brats like to say, make me, or what are you going to do about it, or things like that. And while those phrases might be okay in one dynamic, it might not be an okay phrase to use in another one.
Yeah, like for instance, I can say good boy to my dom and he'll normally take it as a joke. If we're in scene and I say it, then he uses it as, you know, part of the scene, obviously, because then I'd be bratting in scene. But I can say good boy to him and I don't really have consequences unless it's a punishment. But there are other people who would have a immediate consequence or probably like a pretty bad punishment for it.
Right. I would never in my wildest dreams think about calling my dom good boy. That would not be a punishment. That would just be like, yeah, you're never doing that again. So I don't.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, like, I know definitely this may be more of a primal brat kind of thing, but he is not okay with me like laying a hand on him at all, even really playfully, because he is 0% masochist, and that in our dynamic is like a huge disrespect thing.
And see, difference between me and my dom is he'll, like, even this morning, so he came up behind me and he was like slapping me on the butt. I got spanked a few days ago, so my butt's sore, so he was messing with me and I kept telling him to quit, and I turned around and I hit him, like, not to hurt him, but I turned around and I hit him, and like nothing happened because it was being playful and I wasn't trying to hurt him. So like, just hearing the differences between your dynamic and mine, you can already see there are different limits for what is allowed within bratting and what isn't. For me, I can't brat at directions. If I'm told to do something, I have to do them. One of the things that really is allowed is I'm allowed to have a smart mouth. But if directions are given, like, bratting back at them is not something that I'm allowed to do.
Yeah.
So a big thing I would say is, you know, in your dynamic, if you have rules or anything, you know, ask, is bratting back against these an okay thing or not? I personally, there's that huge debate that is at least going on TikTok right now, the whole water coffee thing, and you've got some brats who are like, no, I'm not going to drink my water, and they make this whole big thing about it. But I know somebody who is a brat who is not allowed to brat about their water intake because it's a self-care rule, and they are not allowed to brat against something that is self-care related.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly the same with my dom and me, because we have self-care rules regarding, you know, food. I'm pretty good on water on my own, but, you know, like meds, because I have some health problems and things like that. And I don't get punished for breaking those rules because he's not going to punish me for struggling and having a mental illness or mental health problems. Right. But we do have like a reward system where if, you know, I'm doing well for a little while, and for instance, eating is a big thing for me. So if I'm eating enough and regularly for like a week, then I get a reward. So, but nothing ever gets taken away.
Same for me. Me and another partner of mine, not my main partner, but we use the obedience app, and so I get points for doing things, and then if I don't do it, the only thing that happens is I lose those points, and the points I get I can like buy rewards with. And so, you know, same thing, I don't end up, you know, getting something put on me. There's no lines, there's no space, there's, you know, nothing in that type of thing. Along with limits, as far as, you know, making sure you don't go past your dom's limits, I also think it's important for Doms.
Oh,
swear,
when
that
I
was not
put
a Bratting thing.
when I put captions on my videos, it always autocorrects Dom to dumb, and sometimes I just want to leave it.
I mean, Dom in what is it, like Swedish or Dutch or something? It means stupid. That's what Dom means. But I swear that was not a Bratting thing. It was just me trying to talk and my brain and my mouth not being able to keep up. But also not going past, a brat's limits. Like, you might want to negotiate. If I brat against this, like, how harsh is my punishment or punishment going to be to this? What is the reaction that's okay? I had someone who, we got past the vetting process and we were like just in the beginning form of our dynamic, and every time I did something, he always wanted to like come up and choke me and like correct me, and I was just like, as much as I like that and I don't mind like, it being an all the time thing, it just felt like a lot, and it felt really abusive, if I'm going to be very honest.
I was about to say I would start getting scared instead of that nervous excitement you feel, which is part of the reason why I brat. That kind of like, ooh, right. What's he gonna do now?
No, my instinct was right, because it ended up happening a few nights later where he did something that really just triggered some past SA trauma, and I remember going and finding my main partner, because for those listening who don't know me, I'm polyamorous, so I have multiple partners. So, there's my main partner and then the person I was seeing, and I went and found my main partner and I'm like, you need to make him leave. Like, I don't want him here anymore. And then I had my main partner help me type up a text to this person being like, I don't feel safe with you. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
Bye. So, we always talk about not pushing our dom's limits, but I'm like, you also got to make sure your reaction to your brat is within limits as well. Talking about what certain reactions, what punishments, what things are allowed. This really needs to be, I feel like bratting needs to be more deeply negotiated than people tend to think it does.
For sure. Because literally I feel like the first time I played with my dom, or the first time I interacted with my dom and introduced myself, as a sub and stuff, was I said, I'm a brat, and I'm a pretty hard brat, I sometimes I brat too much, to the point where I have to be conscious of how much time I'm spending bratting versus actually doing other things.
Right.
But because, sometimes when you have that banter with someone, you just want to keep going with that. But then you're like, oh, wait, we need to go to bed at some point.
Right. Because I feel like, unlike with different kinks, like, I'm into impact, and that has a specific time and place, and it isn't constantly ongoing. Whereas bratting, can definitely be this, ongoing thing in your dynamic. And so you have to make sure you're not doing it in a way that's going to totally tank your dynamic or your play or anything. So, like I said earlier, I just think bratting needs to be discussed more deeply than people tend to think that it needs to be discussed. Like, you introducing saying that you're a brat, you then have to go into, okay, what does that look like for you? Because you being a brat and me being a brat can look entirely different.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay. And it took a little bit, I mean, I think in every new dynamic, no matter how much negotiation you have, when you're actually in it, it takes a little bit to kind of figure out. And that's why you have to renegotiate from time to time.
Oh, 100%. Like, because I've definitely reached that point with my dom where, like, I was pissing him off. And we came up with a way for him to, kind of let me know that I needed to stop because it would make them shut down.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't say anything, but like I couldn't figure out what I did wrong. And so I just felt, shut out. And we were like, okay, what's a better way of just saying, like, I need you to stop in a way that doesn't completely break the headspace, but I know, okay, I need to back off. I need to quit. I need to, tone down what I'm doing. So we came up with a way to do that. So definitely with Bratting, to make sure everything is consensual and things are going well, negotiate.
Yeah. Like I said, with the mental health rules, we also have a list of like 8 or 10 rules that are, in quotes, okay to brat about. Like, they still lead to punishment, whatever, but it's not something that is jeopardizing my health or breaking any boundaries or anything like that. And
Right.
I think there's only been one time where I broke one of those rules and it genuinely upset him. And I did get punished for that, not when he was upset. But
right, obviously.
That's a very important thing to talk about, because I heard someone on TikTok say that their playing with brats comes from a place of anger and disliking the disrespect.
Ooh.
And that was actually why I made my TikTok, to respond to that video. But that's a different conversation. But definitely doms need to watch out for what they say too, because just as much as tamers or handlers, whichever term we're going to use, as much as they are tough and in charge and, all that kind of stuff, brats still have every right to say, hey, you can't say this to me, or this cannot be a punishment. That kind of thing.
I agree with that. I don't mind being called a brat, but I remember someone said it once and they were angry. They had gotten ticked off, and there's difference between kind of being called a brat in like a cute way and then someone being like, oh my God, you're being such a brat right now. Like, there's a difference in tone. And so I don't like being brat used in a negative sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we are going to talk about bratting in specific instances and places. Tatiana, you brought up a awesome thing earlier about keeping brattiness in check in public. So I'm interested to hear, where that thought came from.
Yeah, for sure. I think, there's a huge ongoing discourse on kink in public. And just as, a collar and leash are kinky things, and you shouldn't necessarily be doing all of that, walking on all fours in public, unless you are at a place where you're supposed to be doing that, if it's like a closed off area, a private area. But with bratting, sometimes you can, as a brat, can cross your dom's boundaries, and they can't even tell you in their stern voice, hey, that's not fine. And it's a difficult balance between being full brat and also just, I guess full chaos brat, or just Tatiana brat. Because there's like low level Tatiana brat all the time. And then there's like the chaos brat, which is in the scenes and like when we do have a few days of 24/7 or TPE for a couple days, then the brat will be there for a while until I become like servicey and stuff. So in public, it has to be somewhere in the middle. If I want to brat a little bit, that's okay. But if I'm going out of my way to do things I know he won't like, or say flirting with other people, I know that's a big thing that I've heard that a lot of brats do.
We're not going to go into that right now.
Yeah, it's something I've seen, and it's uncomfortable. Even though if he were to say, I find that attractive, that would be a different story. Right. But that kind of stuff, off limits. if I were like throwing a tantrum or something in Walmart. Obviously, that is not okay, no matter how regressed I am or how overwhelmed I am. That kind of stuff.
I also will say that I've been in a situation where, you have to be careful how you brat in public because one, your dom may not always be able to respond, and that can make them feel helpless and hopeless. Because especially if, and I'm gonna speak strictly right now between like a female brat and a male dom, because obviously we know roles can be any gendered with anyone. But in society, women are known to be more outwardly emotional. And so, certain bratty behaviors won't seem out of place. But, a dom may feel, well, I can't correct this or I can't do anything because then it could look abusive if in public they don't know this dynamic is taking place. So let's say you brat and they come over to you and, they're talking to you in this very stern voice. To me, if I had no idea what was going on and I saw a man talking down to, their woman like that, I would say something. I mean, me knowing that, relationships can be abusive in either direction, to me it wouldn't matter who was doing the stern talking. But I know that just from videos I've seen of like experiments where they do this, where they'll have a man talking down to a woman versus a woman talking down to their partner, a lot more people tend to respond to the man doing this. And I'm like, you don't want your partner to get in trouble, when it's just part of your dynamic, but you take it out into public. So just like with any other kink, you have to be mindful of what you're doing in public.
Because some kinks in some places are crimes. So you know,
I
we
will correct
don't
myself
want
if
any
I'm wrong.
kinksters getting arrested.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but someone told me, I think like in the UK or at least one of the countries in the UK, like just kink in its entirety is technically illegal.
Yes, I remember Primal Empress made something about that dungeons are completely illegal. Anything kink oriented is completely illegal. So I don't know exactly how it works, obviously, because I don't live there. But I've heard that there are like very private kind of play parties, and it's not something where, where I live, I could probably go find several advertisements for kink events in this coming year online.
Right.
And it's not a crime. But in another country, it totally is.
There are ways to brat in public, though. I don't want people to hear this and get discouraged thinking I can't ever brat in public. You just have to watch how you do it. Like I had a rule at one point because I like doing pet play. So when I would go out in public, my dom would tell me that I was on a leash, and you can't see my hands, but I'm doing like a quote unquote thing here because he's not actually going to put a leash on me in public. And it basically just meant I had to stay within arm's reach. I had to stay so close to him. And we were in the grocery store, and like I walked away and I'm like, oh no, I'm out of arm's reach. And he didn't say anything. He just looked at me. And then I walked back over. And I'm like, to anyone looking on, it looks playful and there's not, a huge thing. We were in Walmart and that happened, and like it wasn't anything super overt or that would look bad to an onlooker's eye. And but so there are ways to do that and it not be overt. Then I mean, there's also that whole argument that even if your kink is covert, you're still doing it in public and you don't have consent. But that's a whole other video and a whole other topic that we can get into at some points.
And definitely I think for me, bratting in public can look like almost like just goofing off, but really I am breaking rules that we set up for a punishment. Like one of my rules is I can't stick my tongue out at him. That's really, really hard because I just kind of react like that in general, I just stick my tongue out. People, I don't know. And or in pictures, I do it a lot. But that's something that will get me a punishment. So I can be doing that in public and no one, like, that's, everybody comments about that rule. It's like, that rule is dumb. And I'm like, I know that it sounds dumb, but it provides a way for our dynamic to be, you know, broader without anybody, like, being uncomfortable.
Right, because I'm like, now for me, that's not part of my dynamic at all, but it is part of my natural behavior, and I will stick my tongue out at him, and that's seen as, you know, quote unquote normal behavior. No one's gonna look at that and be like, they're doing something kinky right now. Like, you know, no one's gonna look at that and see that.
Yeah, but
So,
of course, if
ahead.
you're like bent over someone's knee getting spanked in the middle of Walmart, people are gonna worry.
Right. So, I like that we're talking about in public. We're going to take it to somewhere that is completely out of public, and that is online. This one's interesting because, Tatiana and I are huge people on TikTok, which is why you hear us mention people's names a lot in TikTok. That's how, her and I met. And,
yeah, so many resources on TikTok.
There are some really good ones, and then some people, if you wanted to know later, I could give you a list of people that I'm like,
yeah,
don't.
Always be cautious.
So there's a huge thing that is still talked about and has been for a while. It's bratting online to people you don't know. And normally that happens where and this is typically happens with male doms on TikTok. Well, they'll say things, do things, and someone will brat at them in the comments. And, you know, there are some mixed feelings with that. One, if they're not making a POV explicit brat content, I don't think you should brat back at them.
Mm-hmm.
But there also was the conversation of, if you are making point of view content where you're bratting at your screen, or not bratting, but doming at your screen, and then someone reacts back, you know, don't get mad at them. You can politely ask them not to do that.
Yeah.
But yelling at them saying, hey, you know, that was wrong, blah, like that's not okay. But you don't want to brat to someone online that, you know, didn't ask for it, doesn't want it. I know several doms that I follow on TikTok that are not brat handlers at all, and I definitely wouldn't put any of my bratty comments on their page.
Yeah.
There's really only one person I do that with, but we have a just fun back and forth of me doing that, and that is Jared, the real Jazza. Yeah, like he and I will go back and forth and do that all the time, but like there is a rapport that got built up before I even started doing that.
Oh my god, I just have to say I freaked out a little bit when he followed me, because
I did too.
He was the first kink talker I ever saw on the app, ever. And so he was the first one I followed, and I freaked out. I was so excited.
Sadly, the first one I followed is Fix It Guy, and 'cause I'm not gonna drop his real name because I don't need anybody going and finding him. Unfortunately, that was my introduction, and I used to hype him up, and then like I realized, God, he is toxic AF. But no, so definitely online. It doesn't hurt to ask someone, what honorifics are you okay with your fans using? What behavior are you okay with your fans exhibiting? I probably need to make a new one, but I did make a video at one point where I'm like, you know, I don't like people using honorifics on me. Like, don't put good girl in my comments. Don't pretend to be my dom in the comments. Yeah, I was like, good. I'm like, good girl. I'm like, you don't get to define what's good or not. Like, you aren't my dom. And, you know, I don't like people doming at me in my comments. But so when you're online, just because you have that anonymity doesn't give you the right to brat at someone. That's still non-consensual. They didn't ask for that.
Especially in more serious topics. I remember there was a video about dom drop, and someone commented, I don't care about dom drop.
Yeah.
And it turned into this huge thing. It seems like everybody was talking about it, and their explanation
because they tried
was,
to say that them being
I'm
a
just
brat.
a brat.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not being a brat. That's being a complete asshole. I don't know. Can I swear?
No, I don't care.
Okay.
This podcast is already 18 plus just due to its content. So like,
oh, duh.
I'm like, swearing's not gonna, cross a boundary here. I sure hope not. If you're listening to this 18 plus podcast and cussing does bother you, this might not be the podcast for you. Not judging you, not shaming you, but I cuss like a sailor. Yeah.
Oh my god.
So yeah, just a quick notice out there. If cussing bothers you, this may not be the podcast for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so last place that we're going to talk about where bratting kind of gets into murky, weird waters is if you're going to go to a munch or you're going to go to a play party. Now, munches, I would just say don't brat at all. You're meeting people as people, and like people who just happen to also be kinky. You're meeting the person, not whatever their title or
not
role
the role.
is. Yeah, so as far as munches go, just don't do it. Now, it'd be different if like me and my main partner were to go to a munch and I did that at him. We already have something established. Don't go and meet perfect strangers and brat at them. And that kind of goes into your comment about the whole I don't believe in dom drop thing. I've met so many people that will cover their shitty behavior with, well, I'm a brat.
Yeah.
No, that's just being shitty. Like, you can't just say you're a brat and get away with your crappy behavior.
Yeah, that's why I always say, I feel like consent violations within a DS dynamic, most people think, oh, it's the dom doing that because the dom is usually doing the thing to the sub. But I think it's just more obvious when a dom does it. When a sub does it, it's usually a little more covert.
I definitely agree with that because I've had people, like I've seen multiple people make lots of videos on what do toxic doms look like, but there aren't that many about red flags for submissives. And
I've only made one for red flags for submissives. I haven't hit the dom red flags yet.
I've done dom ones. I think I've done like one submissive one, but I think it was like brat specific, like what are red flags for people that call themselves brats and like things that they do. I need to make more red flag sub content, and but on the other half of that was
play party.
Play party. Sorry, my brain
just froze for a second.
Yeah, it did.
Buffering.
I love my brain. Yeah, basically ADHD is fun. So play parties. So I say play parties or and or dungeons or whatever. If you're negotiating a scene with somebody and you are a brat, you need to make sure that is mentioned. And I'm going to explain why. Because in my newbie sub days, I won't even say newbie brat days, because this is before I even knew that I was a brat and that it had a term. I, was negotiating a scene with someone, and they were telling me, positions or things to do, and I would go to do it. I think they wanted to like put me on a bench or something, but I was being playful about it instead of just doing it. And they thought like I wasn't listening to them and that I was just disrespecting them, but I didn't know that I'm like, no, I'm doing what you said, I'm just being playful about it. But there was a disconnect because I did not negotiate the fact that bratting is a part of my play. And obviously at the time, because I didn't even know bratting was a thing, I didn't even know that needed to be negotiated. But if you are definitely someone that brings bratting into your play, then you need to negotiate that. Because I do also know brats that like when they're playing and in the middle of like a scene, they don't brat, and their bratting is strictly just part of their outside dynamic outside of scenes. But if you're someone who brats in a scene, you need to make sure that is definitely talked about and negotiated, so you don't one, potentially ruin your reputation in a community because someone, might flag you as a consent violator, but also so like you don't offend the person that you're hoping to have this scene with, because then you're gonna lose, they're gonna lose, and it's just gonna be bad all the way around.
And also, bratting can interfere with what either party wants to happen in the scene, depending on what the scene is and who is in which role. There are times where I know we do not have a long time to have a scene. So I need to time my bratting almost. I'm like, okay, I need to tone it down pretty quickly. So in that case, I'll mostly brat during the day beforehand. And then when the scene comes around, I'm getting pushed towards good girl mode already.
I am very much that person that doesn't brat a whole lot during an actual scene. Once again, depending on what the scene is. But I just don't, because, I'm here to enjoy this particular thing that I'm in this scene for. And in my head, I'm just like, well, the best way to enjoy that is to just do it and not fight back against it. So bratting in a scene is a very rare thing for me. It usually only comes up in, like, if I'm doing, like, a pet play thing.
Oh, yeah.
Or if I'm doing a scene that is, like, sexually involved. But if it's something like that's just impact or something that's completely, not pet play or sexually involved, I tend to just go into the scene and we're going to do what the scene is, and then, we're going to be done.
Yeah, we almost always have to start with impact, because that's typically, we have a funny little joke, because one time something of his wasn't working. I was like, just hit it until it works. That's what you do with me. And like talking about spankings. And because literally a good portion of our scenes start with impact. And that's typically because that gets me to stop bratting, for one, and also sometimes I get a lot of anxiety before a scene, and it's a mix of excitement and also like, oh, what if we're trying this new thing? And so he basically like spanks the brattiness out first,
right?
And that's just what works for us. I know some brats don't even like spankings.
Okay, so I think that the time for our class today is rolling into an end here. Any last minute just tips, advice, or anything about this topic that you want to give there, Tatiana? Any last minute things you want to make sure that people know about bratting consensually?
I think the best way to go about it is to learn about your limits, boundaries, style, etc. before you even try to have a negotiation. You need to know yourself before you know how to fully negotiate with other people. At least to an extent. You don't have to be, fully in nirvana. I'm not exactly sure, but
right. No, I get what you mean. You don't need to have it perfect before you start something, but having a good framework is. Adding on top of that, my biggest thing is communication is key. Don't feel bad if you go into something and you get it wrong and you do end up upsetting somebody. Acknowledge it, apologize for it, and then talk about, okay, moving forward, how can we avoid doing that? So, negotiating, renegotiate, constant communication is key to make sure your bratting activities stay within a consensual realm.
Yeah, well, and that keeps it fun. That's how it stays fun.
All right, thank you everyone for listening today. Join us next week for our next class. I'm Brat-tastic.
I'm the Chaos Brat.
And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Never forget I blossom in the moonlight. Screw eyes, glacier with the blue eyes.